Imagine waking one morning and feeling something strange in the air, a silence that once lived beneath all things, now gone. The world hums louder than ever. Screens glow like restless gods. Everyone is speaking, posting, reacting, but few are thinking. We have entered an age not of wisdom, but of volume. The mind, once a sacred instrument of wonder and reflection, has been traded for quick opinion and quicker distraction. In this world, depth has become an inconvenience, and those who still pause to think are seen as slow, outdated, or irrelevant. But silence is not weakness. It is the birthplace of understanding. And the tragedy of our time is that we have forgotten how to listen to others, to the world, and most dangerously, to ourselves. Our ancestors once gazed at the night sky and asked questions. Today, we stare at screens and demand answers. We have become a species addicted to immediacy, scrolling, refreshing, consuming, mistaking activity for awareness. The mind, flooded with information, begins to erode under its own weight. We no longer seek truth. We seek agreement. We no longer think. We react. And in the noise, something ancient inside us has grown quiet, the voice of discernment, of wonder, of wisdom. The philosopher Noam Chomsky once warned that when a society stops questioning, it becomes manageable, easier to control, easier to divide. What he called the manufacturing of consent is not a single act. It's a slow hypnosis. It happens when we trade reflection for repetition and mistake familiarity for truth. Modern life rewards reaction, not reasoning. We are praised for our speed, not for our stillness. Algorithms learn our fears faster than we do, feeding us what we like, showing us what we already believe, building invisible walls around our minds. The longer we stay inside them, the more the outside world begins to feel dangerous, wrong, or foreign. The truth is, the world is not starving for information, it is drowning in it. We know everything and understand almost nothing. There was a time when reading a single book could change the course of a person's life. Now people read thousands of headlines and remember none. Neuroscientists warn us that our minds are rewiring, losing the ability to think deeply, to follow an argument, to hold silence long enough for insight to appear. Emerson once said, "A man is what he thinks about all day long." So what does that make us now, when our thoughts belong not to us, but to the current of collective noise that never stops moving? It is not intelligence we are losing, it is attention. And attention is the gateway to wisdom. Without it, the mind becomes a hall of mirrors, reflecting only what it already knows. You cannot awaken inside an echo chamber. Every time we reach for our phones before our thoughts have even settled, we are training the soul to fear stillness. Every time we rush to comment before we reflect, we bury our curiosity a little deeper. Every time we avoid silence, we choose distraction over discovery. Carl Sagan warned of this long ago. He said humanity would one day depend completely on science and technology, while understanding almost nothing about either. We have arrived at that prophecy, a civilization powered by tools it does not understand, guided by emotions it cannot control. In that confusion, truth becomes less important than visibility. The loudest voice wins, the calmest one disappears, and so collective stupidity is not born of ignorance. It is born of fatigue. A tired mind does not think, it obeys. When thinking becomes rare, those who still do it become dangerous. They are called rebels, cynics, or dreamers, but they are only awake. To think clearly in an age of noise is the purest form of rebellion. Because the world does not fear ignorance, it profits from it. What it truly fears is the individual who pauses long enough to see through the illusion. True thinking takes courage. It asks us to stand alone in the field of collective certainty and whisper, "Are we sure?" That whisper in our time is revolutionary. For to question the obvious is to threaten the systems that depend on blindness. Critical thinking has not disappeared. It has gone underground, into quiet rooms, late-night walks, journals, and those few conversations where souls still meet without agenda. It lives where silence is still honored, where truth is not trending. It is earned. If this is the age of noise, then it is also the perfect moment for the birth of stillness. Every collapse carries the seed of renewal. And perhaps this is the hidden mercy of our time, that in drowning in noise, we are finally remembering the holiness of silence. So if you feel tired of the shouting, if your soul aches for clarity, you are not broken. You are awakening. For awakening always begins as discomfort in a world that has grown numb. To think is to rebel against unconsciousness. To be silent is to reclaim sovereignty over your own mind. To observe before reacting is to stand at the edge of the machine and remember that you are not part of it. The noise cannot survive a mind that remembers how to listen. And that is where all true revolutions begin. Every great civilization has faced a moment when its tools began to shape its makers. We built systems to guide us, education, media, institutions, but somewhere along the way, they began to confine us. What was meant to free the human spirit now restrains it. The machine we created to teach us how to think has quietly replaced that purpose with teaching us what to think. The machinery of conformity hums all around us, subtle yet relentless, and most have forgotten how to hear anything beyond its rhythm. From childhood, we are taught obedience disguised as order. We learn to repeat before we learn to question. In school, curiosity is praised only when it fits neatly within the curriculum. The child who wanders too far from the expected path is corrected, not encouraged. This is not education. It is indoctrination through repetition. John Taylor Gatto once said that schools don't truly teach anything. They train you to obey orders. He was right. Modern education was built not for thinkers, but for workers, predictable, efficient, replaceable, and yet life cannot be lived by instruction alone. The soul is not a machine to be programmed. It is a fire to be tended. The moment we trade wonder for compliance, we lose something sacred. Emerson wrote that whoso would be a man must be a nonconformist. But today, nonconformity is treated like a threat, not because it's wrong, but because it cannot be controlled. To think differently in a system that depends on sameness is to commit a quiet act of revolution. When we leave school, we imagine we have graduated into freedom, but most simply enter new classrooms, workplaces, corporations, and digital networks that operate on the same principle: compliance. We call it professionalism, we call it brand safety, we call it social harmony. But beneath these polished names lies the same silent expectation. Do not question too deeply. Do not deviate too far. Do not think beyond your assigned role. The reward for obedience is comfort. The punishment for independent thought is isolation, and so the mind learns to shrink itself. We speak only what will be accepted. We post only what will be liked. We begin to measure truth, not by its integrity, but by its applause. Slowly, quietly, the self dissolves into the collective, and the collective, guided by fear of rejection, becomes its own jailer. The philosopher Erich Fromm called this escape from freedom, the strange human desire to surrender liberty in exchange for belonging. True freedom is frightening because it demands responsibility. It means you can no longer blame the system or your tribe or the crowd. You must think for yourself. And in a world where comfort is currency, that is the most expensive choice of all. Social media is the new cathedral of conformity. Its algorithms preach the gospel of reaction. Its priests are influencers, and its altar is attention. What was once a tool for connection has become a marketplace for distraction. You are not the user. You are the product. Your emotions, your clicks, your outrage, all harvested to feed a machine that thrives on unconscious engagement. Every time you scroll, you are voting for what the world will become. And what we are voting for now is noise. Outrage has become the new entertainment. The world no longer listens to understand. It listens to attack. The digital mob does not debate, it devours. And those who dare to question the orthodoxy of the moment are cast out with hashtags. and headlines. It is not that we have lost our intelligence, it's that we have outsourced it to the crowd. We've mistaken being informed for being wise. But information without reflection is like fire without air. It burns hot, then dies. The Canadian philosopher Marshall McLuhan foresaw this when he said, "The medium is the message. The way we receive information changes the way we think. The endless scroll, the flashing image, the 10-second video, these are not neutral tools. They shape the mind into fragments. They teach impatience. They punish silence. They reward speed over substance, outrage over nuance, certainty over humility. Truth becomes secondary to engagement. The goal is no longer to understand, but to react first and loudest. This is why deep thought feels unnatural now. The mind has been trained to seek stimulation instead of stillness. To read slowly feels like swimming upstream. To meditate feels like rebellion. To sit with discomfort feels almost painful, because we have been conditioned to escape every quiet moment with noise. But wisdom, like a flame, only grows in still air. Ask yourself, when was the last time you read an entire page without glancing at your phone? When was the last time you allowed a question to stay unanswered for more than a moment? When was the last time you changed your mind? Not because you were forced to, but because truth demanded it. These are the forgotten disciplines of the soul, and in their absence, collective stupidity is not an accident. It is the natural consequence of a society that rewards conformity over contemplation. Those who control perception understand this well. They do not need to censor thoughts when they can flood the world with so many distractions that no one has time to think them. The greatest control is not in what you are forbidden to say. It's in what you are too exhausted to question. The human mind, overwhelmed and overstimulated, begins to crave simplicity. It seeks the comfort of certainty, even if that certainty is false. And so the crowd gathers around easy answers and calls them truth. But Emerson warned us, nothing is more simple than greatness. Indeed, to be simple is to be great. Simplicity does not mean ignorance. It means clarity. The quiet mind is not empty. It is focused. The independent thinker does not reject society. He sees through its illusions. And what he sees is that conformity, though comfortable, is death by degrees, a slow forgetting of who you are. To escape this machinery, you must learn again the sacred art of pause. Pause before you speak. Pause before you react. Pause before you believe. In that pause lies your freedom. The moment where you step outside the collective current and remember that you are not its creation. You are consciousness itself, capable of choice, of direction, of depth. Every age of confusion eventually gives birth to a few who remember. They are not louder than the crowd. They are quieter. They are not stronger by force. They are stronger by stillness. They are the ones who begin to see through the noise, not because they have new information, but because they have rediscovered an old truth. That wisdom begins where certainty ends. In their silence, they reclaim what the world has forgotten, that thought itself is sacred. The modern world mistakes silence for absence, but in truth, silence is presence. It is the space in which the mind returns to itself, in which the scattered fragments of attention gather again and form something whole. When you withdraw from the constant hum of society, even for a few moments, you can hear the faint voice of the soul, that inner compass that does not shout but whispers. Emerson called it the over-soul, the quiet current beneath all consciousness, the eternal self that sees beyond the illusions of opinion and noise. To reach it, you do not need technology or status or validation. You need only the courage to be still. Thinking is not the act of producing opinions. It is the act of listening, deeply, patiently, until truth reveals itself. But most do not wait long enough to hear it. The modern mind is like a crowded room. There is no space left for meaning to enter. To reclaim your thought, you must first make room for it. You must clear away the noise, the constant stream of headlines and reactions, and allow yourself to dwell in questions without rushing toward conclusions. In that dwelling, the soul begins to breathe again. True thought requires humility, the willingness to say, "I do not know." In a culture obsessed with certainty, this is seen as weakness. But to the wise, it is strength. For certainty closes the mind, while curiosity opens it. The philosopher Socrates said that the only true wisdom is in knowing you know nothing. Emerson lived by the same creed. He believed that knowledge is not a possession, but a process, a living relationship between the self and the infinite. Every thought, if followed deeply enough, leads not to an answer but to wonder. The tragedy of our time is not that people are uneducated, but that they are over-informed and under-reflective. They mistake familiarity for understanding. But understanding is not something you find in data. It is something that grows in stillness. You do not think your way into truth, you awaken to it. You cannot force clarity, you must allow it. And that allowance begins the moment you stop defending what you already believe. Critical thinking, in its purest form, is an act of love. Love for truth, love for reality, love for the sacred freedom of the mind. It is not a weapon to win arguments. It is a mirror to see oneself clearly. It demands that you question not only the world, but your own thoughts about the world. Why do I believe what I believe? Whose voice am I echoing? What fear am I protecting? This self-inquiry is not easy. It dismantles the false foundations of the ego. But in that dismantling, a greater integrity is born, one that no propaganda, no crowd, no algorithm can touch. To think freely is to return home to yourself. It is to remember that beneath the layers of influence and identity lies something unshakable. The original self, unafraid of silence, unafraid of solitude, unafraid of truth. That self does not belong to any ideology or group. It belongs to the universe, and the universe belongs to it. Emerson called this the divine harmony, the realization that when a person becomes truly awake, he aligns not against the world, but with it. The path back to clear thought begins with small acts. Read something that challenges you instead of something that flatters you. Spend an hour without the digital pulse of the world. Let discomfort become your teacher instead of your enemy. Speak less. Observe more. Ask not, "What should I believe?" but "What is true?" These are the ancient disciplines of the philosopher, the poet, the mystic, and they remain the only antidote to the fever of our time. In the still mind, something extraordinary happens. The world, once chaotic, begins to arrange itself into meaning. The noise becomes pattern. The confusion becomes clarity. The contradictions of life, joy and sorrow, success and failure, light and shadow, no longer appear as opposites, but as companions in a single dance. To the quiet mind, even suffering reveals its purpose. It awakens what comfort never could. And perhaps this is the final truth Emerson would whisper to us across the centuries, that thinking is not merely a function of the brain, but an awakening of the spirit. It is not about mastering the world, but aligning with it. The goal is not to control truth, but to become transparent to it. To think clearly is to see the world not as we wish it to be, but as it is, and to love it still. So, if you find yourself weary of the noise, step away, step into silence, not to escape the world, but to see it anew. For in that silence, the machinery of conformity loses its power, and the machinery of consciousness begins to hum again. You will find that thought has not vanished. It has merely been waiting for you to return. The revolution we need is not of weapons or systems, but of minds. One soul, awake in thought, carries more light than 1,000 shouting voices. One moment of genuine reflection can shift the direction of a life. And a single mind that dares to see clearly can change the course of history. This is your call, then, not to argue, but to awaken. Not to shout, but to understand. Not to be right, but to be real. In the quiet, you will remember who you are. In the stillness, you will find that truth was never lost, only drowned beneath the noise. Listen long enough, and you will hear it again, whispering the oldest message of all. Think, truly think. And in that thinking, become free.